Going across to him and say good morning to him. Sajid Javid, are you there? He is.
Yeah, hi, good morning.
Very good to see you, Secretary of State.
Good morning.
We've got a viewer here. We have Sue here, who is a GBNews viewer, and we were talking to her throughout the programme this morning, and she's saying, look, your timing on this is lousy, basically.
Well, hello to Sue and to all your viewers. The timing on this, who wants to see a tax rise when it can be avoided? But I think the reality here is that we all know that the pandemic has had a huge impact on NHS and social care. That impact is going to last for many years. And the NHS and social care needs support to get through it. Part of the way it does it is through new money, but it can't just all be about money. It's also about reform and greater efficiencies, better leadership as well. But the money part is important, especially when you have an NHS that is free at the point of use, paid out of general taxation. This new levy will contribute towards, every penny of it will contribute towards £39 billion of additional funding over the next 3 years. That will give the NHS the biggest catch-up fund in its history to crack through that COVID backlog. And it will mean, for example, the NHS can operate at 130% of normal levels of activity. It can get through some 9 million more scans and tests and procedures over that 3 years. And then also some of that money, over £5 billion, will go towards adult social care, meaning more people will get the means-tested support, millions more people, and everyone will be protected from the catastrophic costs of care.
Yeah, but Health Secretary, nobody is denying that what you're trying to achieve is necessary and admirable. It's just the means by which it's being done. And, you know, you only have to look at how we're making lots of savings. I believe that borrowing is 30 billion less than at the time of the budget in October. We've seen huge inflation, tax receipts. We've got money in the bank, the so-called headroom, which cynically looks as though it's been saved just before election time. That could have paid for all of this, couldn't it?
Well, we've had the pandemic. The pandemic has meant, because of the support the government provided, rightly to families, to individuals, to businesses, it meant an additional £400 billion of borrowing. That's money that's going to have to be paid back over the coming years. And it is not economically. It is not sensible just to continue borrowing and borrowing. We're still running a deficit, so if it wasn't the levy, it would mean more borrowing, and that would mean that the public finance, the economy overall, would be at risk at a time when the economy is creating record jobs. And that is, by the way, I think the best way to help people out of poverty and difficult circumstances is to have an economy that's growing, that's creating jobs with record low unemployment. I mean, of course, the alternative way is if we didn't tax and went for that borrowing, it's also morally wrong as well, because it would mean that we would be asking our children and our grandchildren to pay for our health care and our care costs in old age. I mean, how can that possibly be right?
Well, obviously, there's no good time for anything like this, and we know we've got a social care system particularly which has to be fixed and funded. And in defence of you, Secretary of State, I'm just looking at the targets for cancer, people diagnosed with cancer. NHS England says that no more than 15% of people with suspected cancer should have to wait more than 2 months. Well, we're here in Manchester, and the figures here are more than 66% of people diagnosed in January are still waiting to start treatment. Will this new money fix that?
This new money will go a long way into improving cancer care as well. Of course it will. I mean, cancer care it remains a priority for the NHS, rightly so. It was hit very hard during the pandemic, not in terms of just the care the NHS can provide whilst focusing on COVID patients, but sadly many people stayed away from the NHS when ordinarily they would have come forward with maybe some concerns around they might have cancer. They didn't get the regular checkups in the way that they should, and that's been a huge cost for society, and that's not something that any of us want to see again. That's why I'm also pleased that we're opening up as a country. We're the most free country in Europe when it comes to COVID. We've removed all regulations. We're learning to live with COVID because of the huge vaccine wall of defence that we've built. That said, we've still got some long-term challenges in the NHS and care, and that is why this levy is important. And can I just stress the importance of also reform? It can't be just about money. We've got to make sure the NHS is operating much more efficiently. That is why these new community diagnostic centres, there's one here adjacent to this hospital, it's open 7 days a week, seeing thousands more patients for the tests and vital sort of scans that they need. It's why we've also got surgical hubs which are popping up around the country in hospitals dealing with things like cataract operations in record time, half the normal time. This is how we're going to get through the backlog, by reform as well as the funding from the new levy.
That must be music to your ears, Sue, listening to what Sajid Javid's saying.
Yeah, I've heard it all before, though, and nothing ever happens. And I think, at the end of the day, Mr. Javid, you're saying that we shouldn't let our children pay for old age. I've been paying for other people's old age all my working life. I've also been paying for the World War II, because that only finished being paid for in 2006, and I was working a hell of a long time before that. And you don't seem to take long-term decisions about the NHS, and everybody's frightened to death of saying proper reform. We just fiddle around with the edges. Go and ask the people in the NHS how they want to reform it, because they will tell you. They know better than you or the managers or anybody else. Go down to the sharp end of the business and ask them.
Well, let's ask the Secretary of State. Has he done that?
And thank you for that, Sue. And on both of those points, they're both important points. And on your first, that yes, we all pay for the NHS. You have done, and thank you, throughout your life through your taxes, as have millions of others. But I do think that as the people are living longer, of course, that's great news, but the costs of the NHS are rising significantly year by year. Plus, there's many more treatments today for the NHS than there ever were before, and people rightly want to have access to those. So the cost of the NHS has risen significantly over many years. This year, the NHS's budget is equivalent to the GDP of Greece. It's a significant budget that the public are paying for. As I say, we've got to strain every sinew and get everything we can out of every pound that's invested. But in terms of the cost to our children, if we keep piling on borrowing onto our children by just looking to issue bonds and borrowing in that way, then I'm afraid that the cost for them would just become too great alongside the borrowing we've already had for the pandemic. And then in terms of reform, you're absolutely right about listening to everyone, including the people, or the fantastic people that work throughout the NHS, and that's exactly what we're doing with the reform programmes that we've set out through the white papers I've published, through the speeches that I've made on reform. But it's not just about listening to people in the NHS. That's an important voice, but the NHS doesn't always get everything right, and we were reminded of that last week with the Ockenden report into the maternity scandal, where we saw mothers that died, deaths that could have been avoided, babies that were stillborn, babies that were severely brain damaged. So we shouldn't pretend as a nation the NHS gets everything right. It is right to question things when they go wrong and to learn from that too.
Just finally, Health Secretary, a message from you then to the millions of workers who today will be thinking they're paying 1.25% more in national insurance. Many of those people don't feel like they're the ones with the broader shoulders able to tackle this crisis in the social care and NHS system that you described, that it shouldn't be falling on them when we're dealing with the cost of living crisis, when we're dealing with rising bills in the wake of what's happening in Ukraine. Your message to them when you feel as though the timing could not be worse?
Well, my message would be quite straightforward, is that we will all benefit from the levy, the increased funding and the services that will provide. We will all benefit from that. But in terms of paying for this, it does actually fall on the broadest shoulders. The 15% highest earners will pay over half the levy. And because of the national insurance tax cut that the Chancellor announced a couple of weeks ago, 70%, the 70% of workers will be paying less national insurance, including taking account of this levy.
Health Secretary, we really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for going into depth and explaining those things, and for talking to Sue, who's become a star on this show, basically. And we really appreciate you giving her that
Thank you all, and thank you, Sue.
as well.